table saw fence is one of the most important tools that comes with our table saw. Cutting into it, I think it's safe to say, is the last thing any of us want to do to it. With my thin strip jig, I showed you how you could cut thin strips of wood without taking a chance by cutting too close to the fence. Sometimes though, that's not entirely possible and we have to rely on a sacrificial fence. Today I'm going to show you how you can make a table saw fence clamp to do just that from the loose change you probably have in the ashtray of your car. Let me introduce you to the U-bolt clamp, easily found at just about any box store. The truth is, you really only need half of one, but since so many box stores frown on half returns, you'll have to settle with making a couple of these. One that you'll go to when it's time to use it, and the other you have tucked away when you can't find the first one. Pay attention to the threading on the U-bolt. You'll want to make sure that the fence of your table saw width is slightly bigger than the threading from the U. If it's not, you'll end up with a gap you might not be able to put a knob on. Now we're going to cut this guy in half. Of course, there's more than a million ways to do this, but I'm going to do it by clamping it in my drill press vise and using a grinder. In another video I've suggested getting one of these, and I'll do that again here. They're just so useful. I'll leave a link to one that I love in the description below. After we've cut it in half, it'll have some sharp corners we'll want to round over. I did it with my strip sander, but some elbow grease and sandpaper would work too. With that done, we'll only need a piece of wood that's about 1 inch to 1.5 inches long. The width will only need to be enough to house the bolt end with a little extra on the sides. My bolt is 3/8 of an inch, which was the size of the drill bit I used. Because it's so small, I used a clamp to hold it while the bit did its business. A few runs through, cleaned it up, and I'm good to go. Now we'll want a knob of some kind to tighten this clamp to the fence. Of course, if you've watched any of my other videos, you know how I feel about using these knobs. Which is why I suggest watching some of my other videos on how you can make knobs for hardly anything. Once we have our knob on, we're actually done with the clamp, but let me show you how you'll use it. Remember the diameter of your bolt because you'll need to use that size for any jig you intend to use with it. Here I'm going to make a combination miter and table saw stop. The width is just as tall as my table saw fence, and the miter is as tall as the miter fence. You'll of course want to drill a hole that's straight, which is why I use my vertical clamping jig. A link to that is in the description. As you can see, I've drilled both the long and short side of this block. With my miter saw, it makes cutting multiple lengths easy. With the table saw, I can carve out one side of a piece of my project without worrying about cutting too far into the wood. But now that I've shown you the basics of how this little guy works, I'm going to show you a better version of it that addresses a minor problem this clamp has. The biggest problem I found with this clamp was that the rectangular piece we drilled out earlier tends to spin away from the fence as you clamp down with the knob. To fix that, I tossed out the store-bought knob and created a better one that eliminates the rectangular piece altogether. With this knob, I created a wider neck that would act as the rectangular piece. Twisting it on now doesn't require a second hand to keep it where it needs to be. Again, a bit superficial, but it makes things easier. Anyway, here are a few neat things these little guys can do in case you've never had the pleasure of working with one of these before. Thanks for watching. If you like the knob, you might enjoy the full build of it that I made in a separate unlisted video. That video link is both at the end of this video and in the description. Give us a like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. Follow me on Instagram at MakeThingsWithRob, and remember to keep making things.